This is the 46 of 46 podcast summit session, where we'll talk all things Adirondack, backcountry, and beyond. From high peak stories and adventures to trail tips and tricks, we'll dive deep into the heart of these mountains and the people who passionately climb them. Adirondack maps and spruce traps to bushwhacks and backpacks. It's all here on the 46 of 46 summit sessions. Hello and welcome back to the 46 of 46 podcast summit sessions. It's been a little while since I've put out a summit session, and my guest today has been on the show not once but twice in the past to tell the story of her recent FKT quests, pretty much right after she finished, to get the story firsthand. And she is back again today, except this time she's here in the studio with me to talk more about the FKT attempts that she's done here in the Adirondacks and all over, and tell some stories of her favorite ones. She currently holds 101 FKTs, which, if you don't know, FKT means fastest known time for completion of whatever route she's doing. And she is a beloved player here in the 46 of 46 universe, and her name is Bethany Garretson. Bethany, welcome back to the 46 of 46 podcast for the third time now.
Thanks, James. Thanks for having me.
Yeah,
so
it's
great
always
to
a pleasure.
be here.
Yes, it's great having you in person. So we've done 2 episodes now, and I've never met.
I know.
I mean, I see you like every other day on social media, so it's like I know you, but I don't know you.
Exactly.
Now I know you. Yeah.
Isn't social media such a strange
It's
thing
a strange
that
world.
way? Yes.
Well, it's like, especially around here, you have so many people, myself included, yourself, like you meet people on social media and suddenly you have friends you've never met, but you converse with them constantly, or you've never met and then somehow you connect and like become real friends.
Yes.
Like in real life.
No, it's amazing. And then there's that like trail pass with someone that you have never met, but you know the face, and it's like, oh my gosh, you actually go by like the social media handle for that person.
I know, it's so funky. There's a person that I saw. I don't know his Instagram name off the top of my head. His name is Dakota. I know him from social media, but I saw him walking down Main Street yesterday, and I thought about like saying hello, but I was like, I don't really know you, and I don't know if you know me, but his name's Dakota. Shout out to you if you listen to this podcast, but I know him from his social media. So it just happened yesterday.
Yeah.
Craziness. But how's your summer been? Despite all the rain, like how has your summer gone?
It has been great. It has been busy. I was pushing to 100 more so in May and June, right before the rain started. So if we all rewind our minds back to the end of May, early June, trails were amazing.
Sure.
They were so dry. They were so fast. It was amazing. And I would say during this rainy time, I've just been doing more work. I'm working on a book. I'm editing that and doing some guiding in the high peaks.
Excellent. Yeah. Well, can you talk about your book, or do you not want to talk about your book?
Oh, I can.
Because you mentioned it, and I'm also kind of a book guy myself. So
yes.
Tell us a little bit.
Yep.
Whatever information you want to share about it, of course.
Certainly. It's still a work in progress. The manuscript is done. It's in the edit phase right now. It is called Unsupported. So it is about the 46 unsupported through hike with Katie Rhodes in 2020. And it is about really my quest, my journey to getting there, because it was a decade-long quest. I learned about it when I was 23, when Corey and Jan did it, and that was my dream. And then in 2020, we realized it, but it's about teamwork, and it's about women empowerment, and it's about mental health in America, and it's about a lot.
I mean, there's a lot of story in just finishing it, let alone what it takes to get there. So I think that'll be awesome. And you guys can hear that whole story here in the 4646 podcast. I don't remember which episode it is, but scroll back and you'll be able to find that summit session episode to get the story. But that's great. That's fantastic. How long have you been writing this?
I started last February.
Okay.
So it took me about a year. I take sometimes breaks from writing. Writing for me isn't something I can just do every day. It flows. But it's I finished that up in June.
Very cool.
The first part.
That's exciting.
Yes.
That's
no,
exciting.
it is.
So you'll definitely have to come back when the book comes out.
I will.
But we'll do that in the future. So before we get into talking about your FKTs and stuff, how about this last week in the Adirondack Park? So you live in Wilmington.
Yes.
And we all saw what happened in Keene with the Marcy Field, I guess, not destruction. That's too harsh of a word.
Vandalism.
Vandalism, yes. The Marcy Field vandalism, super crazy and just, head scratcher. And then all of the floods in the more kind of like western, central Adirondacks town, roads have been washed out. Also over in Vermont's wild. Like did you see the pictures of Montpelier's Main Street, people in the canoes? That's crazy. But man, quite the destruction in the ADK this week. Is actually very disheartening given it's like the summertime. It's the time these towns need to thrive.
Yes. And I would say it's a strange summer too, even with the wildfire smoke that coincided a bit with the flooding, and it felt there were just some days where it really wasn't safe to go outside or to certain areas. And yeah, it's been interesting.
Yeah, I was up on Mount Joe, not yesterday, but the day before. And it was like, so my brother-in-law, him and my sister and their family just moved back to the United States from Honduras. He's Honduran. So like he, has the green card now. It's been a long process, this whole thing. So he's finally up here, and we finally got to go on a hike and it's like, it was so hazy and so like, you can only see the outlines of the mountains. And I like apologized to him like 10 times. I was like, dude, sorry. I mean, like it kind of sucks, but it's so much better. But to him, it was just like, this is incredible. What are you talking about? It sucks. But compared to when you can actually see green, it was all like outlines. Very, very bizarre kind of feeling up there. Too bad. Anyways, going back to what we were talking about with Marcy Field, I wanted to mention this here on the podcast. They are going to be having volunteer yard work basically at Marcy Field to help restore it. It will be Monday at 10 a.m. as of right now, and this episode is actually going to come out today as we record this.
Wow.
Because that is Monday at 10 a.m. So I wanted to get that out there because if we put it out next week, we kind of missed it. But this will be a late episode for this week, but that's fine. I wanted to get this out this week for this exact purpose, because if you want to volunteer, you want to help, Monday at 10 a.m. at Marcy Field, they are going to do some yard work. So,
that's great.
Get involved if you're around. It's summertime. Hopefully you can.
Yeah. The Marcy Field's one of my favorite places.
Absolutely.
And it's great to see the community come together.
Mm-hmm. It's also one of those things where the amount of people who I've heard talking about it or mention it to, like they'll say, they did what? And it's always met with, why? Why would anyone do this? Which is why this is such a bizarre kind of set of bizarre vandalism. It just doesn't really equate other than stupidity. That's the one that annoys me. This is the type of thing that annoys me. But anyways, let's move on. So let's talk about your background before we get into this. In case you're new to the podcast, tell us a little bit about yourself. How'd you get into the outdoors? How'd you end up here in the Adirondacks? Give us your quick story.
All right. Well, I grew up in Cherry Valley, New York, which is near Cooperstown, Baseball Hall of Fame, Mohawk Valley. It is between the Catskills, like the foothills of the Catskills, and then you can start to see the rise of the Adirondacks. I grew up on a farm. I was always outside. I didn't like wearing shoes. I ran around. I would walk from my house to my grandparents' house, which was about 3 miles away, to work on their farm. I played sports, soccer and basketball in high school and college. So sports were my priority, and being outside. So it's what made me the happiest, and I just loved it. So I ended up going to college, playing soccer, and it was on a trip up here to like the Plattsburgh area, playing another team, where I just saw this landscape for the first time. I had gone fishing with my grandparents down near Piseco, so the southern Adirondacks. I really wasn't too far from, about 30 minutes where I grew up. But seeing the mountains up here and the wall face of rock.
Yeah, sure.
I was just about 20 at the time, and I felt drawn to this area. And then my mom, she's like, well, there's a college up there, Paul Smith College, and you want to do environmental studies. They have that. And I visited the campus and I just knew it was, and it was like a horrible, rainy, windy day in November, you know, like one of those
I can picture it.
Gray November days. And I loved it. And it was just so epic. And those are still some of my favorite days in the mountains, when it's just gray and you feel like you could be at higher altitude than you are, or just like in a more epic setting.
Sure.
So that's how I got up here. I transferred, went to Paul Smith's, graduated there in 2009. And then I moved away for a little bit, not too long though, came back and started working as a guide in the field of wilderness therapy. And I did that for 4 years. And then I became a college professor at Paul Smith's.
All right.
And now I'm back in the therapeutic setting, working with teenagers.
Very cool. Very cool. It's quite the story to make. It's just like a very linear story that makes perfect sense how you're here. And I commend you for being a young person who is still here.
Thanks.
You know, we need people who are our age of the spectrum here in this park right now. And that's why I'm always telling people, move to the Adirondacks, because, you know, it is hard to get young people to move here.
Yeah. And to find a system that works for you. And I've done a lot of different things, even on the side of what I do. And some of that's guiding, some of that's writing. But I can't be more thankful than what it's brought me, because it's just amazing. And it was hard to start out here, but I am really glad I stuck it out.
Sure. Yeah, it is certainly hard. So obviously you grew up playing sports. Sports were life. So it's a natural kind of progression for you to enjoy this mountain landscape and then be like, okay, well, now I got to start hiking these mountains. So take us through. So you're not only hiking, you're not just walking up the mountains, you run up them. So that's a whole other, you know, side of the spectrum here. But take us through the, you know, your journey going, at least exploring the mountains at first, you know, I guess your first round of the 46 and how it transitioned to running and trail running. And then eventually we'll get into the FKT stuff where you're going for specific times. But yeah, kind of take us through that transition.
Well, it couldn't be more perfect timing than this weekend in Ironman in Lake Placid, because when I came out of college, I was 23, and that summer I remember exploring triathlon, and I had a friend who recommended it to me because I was really sad at the idea that I wasn't going to do a soccer preseason. I wasn't training for anything anymore. And so one of my friends took me to a bike shop, and I looked at the price of the bikes and I was like, oh, I can't do this. I was just out of college, working 3 service jobs, just trying to, you know, make enough to stay up here. I thought of selling my car, and then, you know, that wasn't a great idea.
Yeah,
so,
not up here.
No.
You're going to need that bike if you sell your car up here, though.
Exactly. And so Ironman triathlons were out of my reach at that time. And I looked at what I had in my own closet, and it was running shoes, a backpack, and some water bottles. And I was just starting to hear about the high peaks. I did not know many of them. You know, I knew Marcy by name, Whiteface. That was about it. So I got a girlfriend to go with me, and I'm like, hey, let's go hike this mountain called Marcy. And it's the highest, and we might as well do the highest if we're going to do one of them.
Why not?
Because like, that's really what I thought in my mind at the time. Like, I had no intention of this was going to be my next thing. I was like, well, I might as well do one, and it might as well be Marcy.
Of course.
And it was a rainy June day. It was Father's Day, 2009. And there was no view, hardly anybody on trail. And I really didn't enjoy it too much other than just being out in the backcountry. But when we got above tree line, I remember really starting to love it, and just the feeling of I didn't know what was coming up next because we were in a bank of fog, really. And there was no noise, and it was like nothing I had ever been in before. And And then when I started coming down the mountain, I think that's when I really started to feel something different. And it was the movement of trail running a little bit, of that just going with gravity. And I would run sections and then wait for my friend and then run. And then I got to Marcy Dam, and I was barefoot a lot.
Okay.
Growing up, and I was barefoot a lot in college. And I remember just taking off my shoes and throwing them in my pack, and I ran out the last 2 miles or 2.5 miles barefoot. And I got back to my car all wet and muddy and just really happy.
Mm-hmm.
And it was, I miss sports, and I miss that feeling of sweating and the sore muscles. And I felt that. And I just kind of sat in the parking lot for a while and looked at people coming and going. And I was like, okay, I think I'm going to get a map. I'm going to look at what else is around here and just start climbing to really run down mountains.
Yeah.
Right. that was what made me excited, was the descent part.
Fascinating. That's the part I look forward to the least.
Yes.
I am the polar opposite. I'm happy to climb all day, coming down like, God, this is the worst. But that makes perfect sense. So you obviously went through your first round of the 46 and hiking all these other mountains. And then at some point that must have transitioned to, and I can tell you're looking for the next thing. In general, I can tell that about your personality. So clearly there was a point that you said, okay, how can we up the game now?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it came all together pretty quickly, because Father's Day, Mount Marcy, and then that summer I did half of the high peaks. I would just go out on I had about 1 day off a week, so I would pack in as much as I could. And I also realized I almost warmed up after the first mountain. Like, I felt better after the first mountain and just kept going and going. And so that first summer finished about 23 of them. And that was around the time that Jan and Corey completed the unsupported thru hike. It was September 2009. So 3 months in of me climbing the high peaks, history is made.
Sure. And
I didn't see it. Someone gave me the newspaper article because they knew me a little bit. I think I was earning this reputation of I just could keep going all day, and I liked going all day. And I really didn't have many people I could hike with because the pace was just off. And I'm a more patient person today than I was then. I wouldn't wait. I would just run up, I would run down. I'd be like, well, I'm going to go do this one now.
Sure.
And I just was very comfortable being by myself too. And so people started to know that I was doing longer distance and doing them fast too. So this woman, she didn't really know me that well, but she just was like, well, here's this article. You need to read it. I think this is something that you could do. And it was a little bit on both. It was on Jan's supported 46, because that was 2008. And then it was on the thru hike 2009. And she's like, you're going to get one of these records one day.
Cool.
And so that became it. And I started, I just got a notebook and I started keeping more data on it, all the research I could get, which at the time was mostly newspaper or, I met Jan, I talked to him. I talked to Ed Palin, who had done a quick round of the 46. And that's where it started for me. And it became my focus. So when I completed my first round of the 46, it was really in mind of, I need to do all the 46 so I can do the unsupported thru hike.
Sure.
At some point.
So you knew real quick that this was on your radar, which is exciting. I like the vision that you clearly demonstrated. All right. Very cool. And back then too, trying to plan it, like you said, there's not a lot of intel. Like the internet wasn't, there weren't Adirondack Facebook groups. There weren't, actually the Adirondack forum page may have existed back then. I don't know. It's pretty old. But yeah, there's like to find information. It's like grab your map and grab your, your string at that point and start measuring.
And I think there were some message boards. I wasn't online. I didn't
it's
do
a different
Facebook.
world then. Yeah.
I really believed in the be outside, be barefoot, be mindful of the environment. I was weary of technology. I just stayed off social media, and I didn't want a cell phone. I had a flip phone for a long time. Yeah, I just lived off the grid a little bit, but knew about these via newspapers and just people. Like, I'm a face-to-face sort of person.
Well, I'm glad we could have this episode.
Yeah, definitely.
So let's back this up. So was 2010 you said you started your first round? Is that when
2009.
it was? 2009. Okay. So 2009, and then you did the supported in 2020.
Unsupported.
Unsupported, yep. Yes. The hike you and Katie, Katie did. Yeah. So that's 11 years in the making.
It is.
So take us through that.
Wow.
I know it's a lot, but take us through it.
Yeah. No, it is. It's like, so, and for everyone listening, it's, if you're working on something and you're not getting it, just keep trying, and everything you're putting in is working towards that. Because the backstory of the through hike was 11 years in the making.
Yep.
And I had never hiked a mountain before. And, before Marcy and before I started getting into this, and no one in my family had, and no one in my family really camped or did anything outdoors. And when I was 23, something that was happening at the same time, I took a job as a wilderness therapy instructor where I had to live in the backcountry for a week at a time. So I was learning how to backpack for the first time, and I almost quit like on my first day when I had this 50-pound pack on, and I was like, this is the most miserable feeling in the world. And we were going up to camp in the Dix Range. And so we're going uphill in the rain with full packs. And I'm like, this is ridiculous.
Sure.
But it was the same thing as Marcy. I didn't like it at first, but then when you push through that discomfort, there's just a whole different level of feeling and awareness. And I think for me, it just ties in a lot to like how I feel we should live. And that's closely to the earth and the ground. And it's just where I'm happiest. So I think I was really just finding a place where I could be my true self too. So I did that for 4 years, and I really honed my skills there. You just become so efficient when every other week you're camping, you're living in the woods, and your systems are so dialed, and like just hacks and tips of, keeping things in Ziploc bags or cutting weight here or there. And I was fine tuning my gear, but not, great yet, and some of it's like financial, I was still younger and didn't really have that ultra light gear yet. So I did try it in 2016. I tried the unsupported, and I did it as a fundraiser for Paul Smith's college, and it was a great fundraiser. We raised a lot of money, but I came out on day 5, right around Haystack Basin, because the temperatures were just soaring. It was going up into the 90s, and I had a run-in with like heat exhaustion, maybe like the beginning of heat stroke a few years back in the high peaks. And temperatures still really freak me out. I think they're one of the most dangerous things, heat exhaustion and what it can lead to. Yeah. So I came out and I felt pretty defeated. I felt like I had a good chance of getting it. I was doing well. And then I was just like, at that point it was 2016. And I was like, well, I've been working on this for 7 years now. Maybe it's just not my thing. And I started to look at mountains out west. I started to look at higher altitude mountains. And I think that was a whole new level of training in a way too, of pushing yourself at altitude, and also fine tuning the gear. And from 2016 to 2020, I was really investing more in ultralight gear, and especially for high altitude, because you want to cut every pound you can on your pack. So I was taking the next level of principles and applying them. So by the time 2020 rolled around, I was pretty dialed, and, I was taking Katie along with me. And I knew, though, at that point, I wanted a partner on it, because I had every year I thought maybe I'm going to try solo again. I don't think it fits my personality, being more extroverted. And I just don't like the idea of being on trail by myself for a whole week.
Yeah, it's not something to look forward to, especially in those moments where you're just like, I've had enough. I'd like to go home now. You need that boost. You need that pick me up from someone else behind you. And then when you feel that way and they act that, they're feeling that way and you boost them up, it boosts you too. It's funny how that happens.
Yes. And that's what happened. So like in 2017, I went back to try it again after 2016, but it was really half-hearted. I packed my pack. I got to Corey's Road and I was like, well, maybe I should just like drive home now, because I really don't think I'm going to do anything. But I went in, I did the Sewards, I did the Santanonis, and then I bailed on Alan. I was just like, nope. I was like, I just mentally had a really hard time getting back into it, knowing that I got pretty close to it in 2016. And I saw myself doing it with a partner. I think I even from the beginning of when I heard about it with Corey and Jan, I was just like, oh, this is a partner thing, and I know people have done it solo since then, but I just saw it as a team effort from the beginning. And I come from team sports.
Yeah. I'm right there with you. I mean, I most of my hiking is by myself due to just kind of necessity, but I'll always rather be with somebody out there. There's just, you can't beat that. The pick me ups, the camaraderie that comes with it. Like, in anything, when you're grinding and you're, putting the work in by yourself and you're tired, it's slightly less tiring when someone right there behind you is doing the same thing. Yes. You just, you just go with one another. And I would never attempt anything big like that without someone. Like for me, the equivalent of what you do, what that is for you, for me was like when I did the Great Range Traverse, I'm like, I'm not doing that by myself. I need to go with someone, even though I don't think that's actually the hardest day in the high peaks at all. Oddly enough, it turns out that way. But I think when you have that extra boost, life is just dramatically different.
It is.
And I'm glad that you didn't. I love hearing this story too. This is just kind of unfolding as we talk, but like, I am a man about perseverance. That's what I'm all about, and not quitting. If you know me, you'll get really annoyed with me about how I get on people when they stop. So I love that your story didn't involve that, but it may have involved that on certain days. There may have been days where you're like, no, I'm done. I can't do this anymore. Or there may have been days or weeks where it's like, you're kind of in those funks, or even months, but like your journey has just continued to go, and you didn't give up, and you look where it took you. It took you exactly where you planned to go, later than you planned. And that happens. That's part of the journey. Yeah. But you still kept one foot in front of the other and went. And man, I love that. That's the stuff that gets me so psyched in life.
Yes. And it is. And I think even reflecting on the thru hike and now I live where I can see Whiteface every day, awesome. Which is the mountain you're finishing very close to. You finish on Esther. Esther is the last mountain of the unsupported. But like just seeing Whiteface every day, Whiteface to me became this icon of keep going. And it felt like what I was being called to. Even when I was 23, I'm a person of faith, and I was like strengthening that relationship out there on trail. And I do really feel like I just kept being led back to the unsupported. And there were times like in 2017, I really just was like, I'm so sick of the high peaks. I need to go somewhere else. I went out west. I would have been so happy if I heard about another woman doing the unsupported. I wanted someone to do it. I wanted a woman's name on the board. And it just, reflecting on the whole story, it's like, well, it was almost like destiny. You know, it's like it was 11 years in the making and it was meant to be. So it's very powerful for me, you know, even today to just see whiteface because it is a huge symbol to me.
Yeah, absolutely. That's great. Your book's going to be awesome.
Thanks.
It's going to be awesome. I can't wait to read it.
Thanks.
Especially already knowing the story. Can't wait to hear the insider information as you really dive into what you were feeling, what it was like.
Oh yeah.
In the bigger pictures. So let's talk about some of these FKTs.
All right.
So you set the female unsupported FKT.
Yes.
You got that. Now, was that number one? Did that start this? Or because you have 101 currently.
Yeah.
So
that was number 5.
That was number 5. Okay.
Yes. So before the unsupported, in 2013, my younger sister, Mallory, and we did the Saranac Lake, like when they announced the Sixer. We did that race and we came in second.
Okay.
And I would say that was like a big race for me in a way. I was just like, this is what I love to do. It's like not necessarily a race where you all line up together, but like where you can be racing in the mountains for a time and, on your own route. So we did that in just around 11 hours, like for the first kickoff round. So that was the first FKT. I didn't know it at the time. I didn't know I had FKTs until 2018 when a friend of mine, she showed me the website. She, she knew I was focused on the unsupported, but also knew that I was losing momentum on it. And she's like, there's other FKTs. And I knew about other ones, like the AT, the PCT, the long trail. I knew about the big ones that you would hear on a more news level, but I didn't know that there were smaller ones. There were ones all around us, really, and that's when I was clicking through because you can go to the website and you can scroll in on the globe and find like dots near you. And I was clicking on those dots and I saw the Saranac Lake Sixer pop up and there was another female time for the self-supported. And I was like, oh, but my sister and I did that and we did it faster. So I have this FKT, right? And so that was the first one I submitted. And then I had done the Bob Marshall Traverse with a friend. And to our knowledge, it was the fastest time. And I submitted that. And I submitted for Bob Marshall Traverse to become an FKT route in the Adirondacks because it's iconic. And I certainly, like Bob Marshall has the first FKT on it, totally. The speed record. And that's gained quite a bit of traction. So that's cool. I like seeing that.
I had someone literally just this week ask me if I could hook them up with a ride because they're going for the Bob Marshall Traverse.
Love it.
So yeah, it's definitely a thing out there right now.
The Bob. Yeah.
The Bob.
It's beautiful and it's brutal.
Yeah, it's a long day. Remind me of the mountains and tell the listeners the mountains in that.
All right. So Bob Marshall, he was a thru hiker, ultra hiker before it was a word. And he did Big Slide. He started at JBL. He had pancakes for breakfast and went up and did Big Slide, came back down and went over to the range. So he did lower and then upper Wolfjaw, Armstrong, Gothic, Saddleback, Basin, Haystack, Marcy. I think he got more food on Marcy from someone. Then down to Skylight. And then he dropped down to around Lake Colden. And then he went up and did Iroquois, Algonquin, right. And then he finished the day with Mount Joe. So it's 14 peaks. It's 15,000 feet vertical gain, about 33, 34 miles. And it's ridiculous.
That's a day. That's a nice week actually right there.
It is.
That's a great week.
Do it. If you really want to do it and you don't want to do it all in a day, it is I think, one of the coolest camping routes too.
If you do backpack the whole trail.
You can.
Yeah, absolutely. Very cool. So write that down if you want to try something new. Whether you do it in one day or not, it's a cool route.
It is.
So that was your early FKTs, and then clearly at that point you had this was on the mind now, and you started building some momentum, getting these other ones. So what were the early days like in your mind as you were figuring out, do I want to go after this? Have I done this before? Do I know, like, how did those early, I guess let's say the first few FKTs past the first one?
So I think coming out of 2017 and, kind of putting unsupported a little lower on my list, that's when I started to look towards, they're still long FKTs, but they're shorter compared to the unsupported through hike. And that was the Bob Marshall Traverse. So I focused on that for a little bit, and I attempted once, got to Marcy, dropped. My partner was having knee issues, and he's like, you can keep going. And I was like, well, I'll go get Marcy, but then I'm coming down. And then I got it on the second try with another partner. And so focusing on the Bob for a little bit, and then going back to the Sixer, and I got the overall Sixer, and I had that for, I think, about half a year before it got lowered twice. And so shorter stuff, and then international higher mountain stuff. And then what really brought me back to the unsupported 46 was COVID and the pandemic, because I had an expedition planned for Denali, May 2020, and I was going to lead that in a group of small people. And we, March happened, and we all know what came with that. And I was just back in Keene and looking at the high peaks again. And it was around that time that Katie messaged me on Facebook. So going back to what we were talking about with social media, and however many times I thought social media was just like a bad thing to stay away from, it has brought me some of the greatest people in my life. And that was Katie.
It's awesome. I mean, yeah, it's like, it's like with anything, you do something too much, it can become a problem.
Yes.
But with social media, it has its pros and cons. And to me, obviously the social element is what it's supposed to be, is the biggest pro, the biggest con being the addiction element. But the social, I have people I would deem my best friends in the world right now. I met via a social media message.
Too.
So I can relate so firsthand to that. And that's a beautiful thing. And so 2020 COVID, you were home and you met Katie, you guys started hiking. And again, you can hear that story on this podcast. You scroll back and you guys went after that, and you were successful, as we've already heard. You have a book that you've been writing about it. So then after you did the unsupported, you said that was number 5?
Yeah.
So that was 5 of 101. So clearly you were off to the races at this point. So take us through your mindset after you hit that FKT and then moving forward from that point.
Definitely. So, and what happened with unsupported was I really thought, I was like, oh, cool. I'm going to do a big FKT every year. This is exactly what I want to train for. And the next one I put in mind was the 46 supported. I wanted to do a Jan. I wanted to do a back-to-back. Like he did supported one year, and then he did unsupported the next year. And I think that is one of the greatest accomplishments out there in the hiking world, like for someone to hold both of those titles. And I thought I could give it a go. And so in 2021, August 2021, made an effort at that. And for me to train for something like that, I had to put myself on a schedule. I've never worked with a coach. I'm not someone who wants to go to the gym every day and work out every day. I actually really struggle with consistency in training. I just love going out and hiking. And so I've had some good mentors though. And one of my, he does coach, and he, has been coached, and he just told me, he's like, well, keep logging trail time. Just keep doing that. So when I was gearing up for the supported 2021, I went through the FKT website and I just started picking out ultras in a way. I picked the 6er again. I picked the 9er. I picked there's the giant RPR Traverse, but then
New Russia Traverse.
Yes.
Uh-huh.
So you do the Traverse and then you do it again.
You go back?
Yes.
Oh, I didn't know that was a thing.
Yes.
That's a big day.
It is. And it makes you really it sucks.
Yeah, I bet. That's a long day.
Yep. So I picked stuff like that, stuff around 30 miles that had about 10,000 feet vertical gain for me to do once a week and to keep pushing my miles up.
Mm-hmm.
So
hold on, let's pause you for a second. So you were doing these once a week.
Mm-hmm.
So 30-mile days once a week. You're doing more than running a marathon once a week. So just take note, everyone. That is impressive. That is amazing. Look at what she's doing. That just blows my mind. That's incredible.
Thanks.
Every week. But anyways, continue.
Yeah,
No, it's great. It's fantastic.
FKT Friday.
Yeah, I love that. I love it. But we're talking some big days. We're not, you go you hike 15, 20 miles once a week. There's a huge difference between 30 and 20 in terms of mileage.
There is.
Big days in the high peaks typically kind of max out around that 20, but 30 is just a whole other realm of miles. So it's incredible.
And as a training technique, it worked for me. And because you do a really big day like that, and then I would rest and recover for a few days, maybe, swim and bike, do some yoga, and then I would do a smaller hike. And for me, a smaller hike is 5 to 10 miles. And then that usually put me around 50 miles for the week. And that's what I was trying to get, going into the supported. And supported came, that was August. And I got to 38 of the peaks, and that's when I dropped. I dropped on Marshall, and I just mentally felt I was behind pace. We were very close to pace, but I just didn't feel like I had it left in me to complete. But in that, I do hold an Adirondack, I guess, record of, I got 17 high peaks in 24 hours.
Okay.
In that effort. And I do believe that's the record for women
Gotcha.
At this time. There's 3 men who have done 24 in 24 hours.
Cool.
But after that, after getting, I would say, you're never close until you're at the finish line. So I can't say I got close to that record, but I did get a taste of it, and I had trained the whole summer for it. I took 2 months off after that. And during that time, I like to rest and reflect and not jump right into, well, what's next? And I did think about doing the supported again, coming back the following year, but I just knew what I had done, my 2016 effort for the unsupported, for the unsupported, and then trying to come back in 2017 for it and just dropping so early. I was like, I think I would have done the same, because you just mentally are pretty zapped. So I just got back out on trail. I did the French Louis loop.
All right.
That had been made in FKT, and I just saw that it was recently added, and I was like, you know what? I love this loop. I went out with another woman who was just interested in FKTing and had followed along when Katie and I did the unsupported. And I think that's what really made me start to look at doing more FKTs, because it was almost this everything came together of, there were women reaching out to me to learn how to FKT. And then from reflecting on the 46 supported and not getting it, I did learn that I really loved to FKT. My training
to
had
push
been,
yourself for those times. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And my training had been fun, and I had gotten out on trail with different people, and I had done different things, and it was just fun. And at that point I had 20 FKTs, and I was looking at the numbers, and women were just still really far down on the list. I think there were 2 women close to 50, but there were men already at 100.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when I started to think about it. I was like, well, what would it take for me to get 80 more FKTs? And that winter, I just started an Excel sheet and I started looking at what other athletes who had a lot of FKTs were doing. And there were a lot of shorter routes.
I bet there were.
Because I did think about that. I was like, well, I don't think I'm going to, maybe get there as fast as I want to get there if I'm doing like 30 miles every FKT. And because I think at that point I did an average of like my first 20 FKTs. I think on average I was doing 36 miles in FKT.
Yeah, that's huge.
Yeah. But once I started looking at the smaller stuff and different ways to do them and learning the rules more, I was just like, you know what? I think I can get there.
Mm-hmm. And you did.
Yeah.
101.
Yes.
That's exciting.
Like that.
That's exciting. And also for you listening, you can hear both the unsupported through hike story and the supported hike story, FKT attempt here on the podcast. Just scroll back. Those are the other 2 episodes that Bethany has been here for. And we've gotten the story day by day, mountain by mountain. It's fun to listen to. So you can hear all those stories that she's talking about. But so one of the things that grabs my attention based on what you're saying, because I'm a big believer in you need to build momentum. People decide, they want to diet. They want to go to the gym. They want to climb mountains. They want to do this. They want to be 46ers. You got to start and just get some stuff under your belt, build some momentum. Like for hiking, for example, that's why I tell people, set out to do the Lake Placid 9 or the Tupper Lake Triad or the Saranac Lake 6. Like there's a chunk of things that you can do to gain some momentum, build some, experience out there before you dive into the high peaks. Or you get people who start the high peaks and they're like, there's 46 of them. Oh my God, there's too many. I'll never do that. It's like, okay, we'll start range by range, do a range. Okay, you did a range. So you did another range. Oh, now you have 6 mountains. Like you got to start building that momentum. And that's what it seems like you did by doing these shorter. I mean, you had already had some momentum from doing these things, but talk about how it makes you so much mentally stronger and ready to keep going when you start building momentum by doing these smaller FKTs and getting one, and then you get another one, and then you get another one, and that becomes addicting all in and of itself. But it's like a good thing you're being addicted by. You're being addicted by progressing and growing. So take us through kind of what that did for your mental capacity as you continued, because at that point it's like you've done so much. And you're trying to get 80 more to just get to 100. Like that can be very overwhelming. And you could say, yeah, never mind. But you built momentum and you just kept going. So take us through kind of mentally what that was like for you.
Yeah, I like that you bring that up because for me, it would always go back to the unsupported through hike. And to stay mentally focused on that, you don't look at the whole thing. You don't look at it being 183 miles, 46 high peaks. It's just one step at a time and it's the mountain ahead and you have to complete the day. So that really helped me mentally train. And then the 46 supported attempt, which was probably the hardest thing I ever tried to do, just going faster over that distance and not sleeping, or like trying to sleep, but not being able to. Mm-hmm. And so coming out of the 46 supported attempt, everything else was just easy. And one of the ones I did that fall, like after, was the Tupper Lake Triad. And that felt so fun. Mm-hmm. Just like 3 little mountains, about 8 miles, so much fun. Yep. So I was just really like finding a lot of joy in it. And mentally, that was so good for me because reflecting back on this, it was the whole time during the pandemic that I was doing this and it was helping me cope. I was losing grandparents. I lost 3 grandparents during the pandemic. I lost a lot of things during the pandemic. And every FKT I went out for was almost a check-in with myself and where I was at. And I know the story of that day and what I was going through. And, I think for some people, if you're just looking at the numbers, sometimes it can be like, oh, well, she just like wants to, have her name there, or she just wants it for superficial reasons. And it's just so deep to me every time I go out, and what I was going through and what people are going through, and I just encourage people not to judge people. It's not peak bagging to me. I really don't like that word. I don't like the word conquer. I just, I go out there to be with myself. And for mental health, I needed that during those years.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's why I went probably as hard and as structured as I went. And, I went out on days when I didn't even feel like going out, but I knew it was going to help.
Yeah. And all you did was you found a way. And once again, the mountains will do what the mountains will do for you. Like, you found how you can be the best version of yourself and how you can improve yourself and the things you need in the mountain. And you took to the mountains the way anyone will take to the mountains. You just did your version. If people, they, like you were saying, like people can criticize all they want, that you just want your name or this or that, peak bagging, whatever. But it's like, this is how you experience the mountains and how you push yourself. And, people who push themselves, like there is a method to the madness. And again, it's all personal. It's all different for for any person. I spend a lot of time in my gym upstairs. Why would I want to put hundreds and hundreds of pounds on my back? It's hard to explain. I can explain if you want to sit down and talk for 10 minutes, but it's the same thing. It's like, we all have these reasons that we do things because they make us better. And I'm so happy you talked about the mental health portion, because I'm such a huge believer in these things that we do when we push ourselves. They have such an enormous impact on our mental state. Like, people don't realize how much better your life becomes when you've put in the work and you've gone from this sucks to holy cow, look what I did. I accomplished that.
Yeah.
And it's like, if that's in physical terms of like let's say you getting up a mountain, or you losing weight, or you making this big change in your life. And then you have that mental boost of, I did that. And it affects every element of your life when you push yourself and you accomplish something, which is what you've done. And the fact that you talked about that, I just think is fantastic. And I didn't want to let it go, because the mental boost that you get from these things, it's unmatched. And it almost becomes the reason. A lot of people go run, or they go lift weights, or they go hike mountains, and yeah, it's good for your physical health, but it becomes so much more about your mind and and helping you become the person that you need to be, or you want to be, outside of the mountains, and just kind of every element of life. So I'm really stoked that you talked about that.
Yeah.
So as we start to wrap things up here, it's almost an hour. So going with the mindset, element, what have you learned about yourself from FKT 101, but thinking back to FKT number 1? You have clearly gone on a transition and a progression and learned a lot about yourself. So take us through a little bit about that.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah.
Or what are the biggest takeaways that you've both learned? Maybe it's like you've learned, I can't believe I did this. I'm so proud of myself. Or this is where I need work. Or look at what you did. There's gotta be things where it's the same thing like a 46er journey. When you're on 46, you think back to who you were on that first one. You're like, I'm not that person anymore because I've learned X, Y, and Z since.
I think the big thing, because the Sixer race for me would have been 10 years ago. So we're talking about a decade of speed records in a way. And for me, the biggest takeaway, and I want everyone to hear this, is do not apologize for the gifts you've been given, because that is a gift I've been given, to move in the mountains. And it's my home. I feel comfortable there, and I'm fast and I'm strong. And I want to hear more women say that. And I want to have every one of my FKTs be broken by a woman. And I just do not apologize for being there. Do not apologize for being fast. And pursue your passions and what you love. And I have learned things take time. I think that's the biggest thing for me, because 10 years ago, I wanted to be where I am now. I wanted to be there 3 years before that. I wanted all these things, and I just, it takes time. And I think looking back on it, I wouldn't have done it any different way, because where I am today is in a more mature state where when you do have a platform and you can talk about things, I think the biggest things I want to put out there are like, it's faith, it's friendship, it's being there for each other. It's being supportive, learning more about diversity and inclusion and belonging in the mountains, and like really feeling it and really advocating for it, and wanting more women to get on that space and be in that space and feel safe in that space. And that's just, those are my big messages and the big things I've learned, because something I did really learn is that a lot of women don't feel like they belong there. And that wasn't an experience I could relate to, having come from the sports background and success I had, because, it's like I was the MVP. I was a gifted athlete, and the attention was on me and I liked it. And so I came into the high peaks with that same mentality, even though I did experience sexism. Like I would hear comments, I would get looks. There was a solo man hiking, and he told me I shouldn't be hiking solo because I was a woman. And I asked him, I was like, well, who's with you? And
great response.
Yeah. And so I was getting stuff like that. But I really just brushed it off. I just thought it was weird comments. And it wasn't until really Katie and I got the unsupported thru hike in 2020 and listening to Katie's story, because she did not grow up with that confidence, and she'll be the first to say that. And she just was, she wouldn't have gone after it if she didn't see my name somewhere in the attempts. And so, and then just like after that, I heard more stories like Katie's than I did of my own, and just hearing so many stories that just adds up. And so at the end of the day, I did it for that.
Yeah. It's amazing. And I really liked what you talked about when you said you wanted to be where you are 10 years ago, but it's like the world, you weren't ready.
No,
you had to put the work in, and you did, and you're there. You've arrived. Yeah. It's weird. Isn't it funny how like the world doesn't always operate at our, our pace and our timeline?
I'm learning that.
But there's so much to take away. So
there is.
But you didn't stop. And that's why you are where you are. I mean, how many people have messaged me over the last 4 years since I've been doing this podcast telling me, hey, they're going to do a run through the high peaks to raise awareness for this, or they're going for the FKT to show this and show that. And then they're just gone. It's like they're just, it was so short-lived, I guess is what I'm saying. But you just kept pushing, kept going towards this goal that you had. And because of not stopping, you got where you want to be. I mean, you're there. And I think that's very inspirational. As you just met, I'm a father of 3 little girls. Yeah. You are a fantastic role model for them to base their actions and their lives after. I appreciate what you do. It is not lost on me. And yeah, let's start to wrap this up now. So real quick, something fun and right off the cuff, hit me with your shortest FKT. So we know about the unsupported through hike of the 46 high peaks. You can listen to it here on the podcast. Take me, what's the shortest one? And then what are your 5 favorite, or maybe just 5 very memorable ones, not including the unsupported or the Bob Marshall. Hit us with other ones.
Okay.
Yeah, hit us with other ones.
All right, I will. Okay. Shortest. This one is a little gem in the Old Forge area. It's Bald.
All right. Bald Mountain.
Yeah. Bald is 0.9 up, 0.9 down. If that, it might even be shorter than that. But it's all
slab too. So you can like legitimately run up that mountain, and which obviously is what you do, but
it's
even more
awesome.
so there.
It's a great run.
Yeah.
And that was one of the older FKTs, actually, that was on the old website before the new one. But I only know that because like you can still see it on the old pro boards.
Mm-hmm. All right. Very cool.
It's Bald
Mountain.
Yep.
Great mountain, old forage area. Go check it out. It's also part of a hiking challenge called the Fulton Chain Trifecta.
Yes.
Yeah, great little mountains out there. You'll see the Fulton chain of lakes, which as you drive out there are everywhere. So check it out.
Yes. Love it. So going into the 5. All right. I love the Tupper Lake Triad.
Okay.
I do. I think that is a fun run. My friend Jason, who I have done probably about 30 mixed gender FKTs with, he's great. He's amazing. He is so fast. He's so gifted. And he's just so much joy on trail. So we really sometimes we'll even like dress up a little for our FKTs.
Great. Yeah, I've seen the pictures. I've seen the pictures.
We'll throw in a picture of that to spread the joy and the love of just being out there. So Tupper Lake Triad. I have loved exploring the Catskills.
Okay.
So that's another huge gift that I'm just so thankful for this 100 expedition in a way, because like it got me out of the Adirondacks. It got me looking in different areas, and I had never hiked in the Catskills. Even though I grew up
close. Looking at them. Yeah.
Close. So Slide is a great one in the Catskills. Hunter, great one. But the one I'm picking out, I have those. I had Slide that just got lowered. But the Devil's Path. So Jason and I did the Devil's Path in the winter.
All right.
And we did it in January, and the Devil's Path is similar to our Great Range Traverse. I would say, I think it's harder, honestly, just because of you really descend and then reascend. It's not like that little half-mile descent and then reascent. So, and in the winter, it was like 7 degrees starting for us and finished around like 20 degrees for the day.
Sure.
So that one, I've gone to 2 other states to do FKTs, which was really cool. I went out to Utah and I did one, forget the name of it, but nice. I want to bring it up because it was the first time I traveled since COVID. And that was like at the end of 2022. And then went down to North Carolina and did one called Mount Pisgah. That was an awesome run. And that's such a cool one. And that's been recently lowered. So I'm stoked to see that. I don't know if I'm on 4 now. Is that like number 4?
Yeah.
One more. Let me think. Like, I love them all.
Sure.
I actually wrote them down too.
Oh, fantastic.
I did a list of like.
It's good to go back down memory lane.
I journal for sure. Well, the Sixer is always really symbolic to me.
Yeah.
Because it was the first. I know I've mentioned it, but like the one that I did with my sister, I would say that was the beginning of where I am today, because we did it, we came in second, and then I wrote about it for local 80K. So it was this combination of 2 things that I've just always wanted to do, and that's hike and write.
That's great.
About it. So I'm going to end on that one.
I love it. That's a great place to end.
Where it all began.
Yeah, full circle.
Yeah.
That's a perfect place to end it with. So as I wrap up this episode, I always ask people the same few questions. I've asked you a couple times, so we're going to ask you again. What's one unique thing that you always have with you when you're out in the woods? Whether it's in your backpack, it's in your pack. What's something that's just kind of fun and personal to you that you like? I need to hike with that.
Ooh. Depends on the distance, but I think for me, sometimes just like the accessories I wear. I always like to wear earrings.
Okay, well, that's a unique thing.
And sunglasses.
Okay,
so
I don't hike with either.
There you go.
That's
jewelry.
That's a great answer.
I like the jewelry.
All right. Now, what makes the Adirondacks unique? Obviously, this is a huge question for you because your whole life has moved to be revolving around this park, and it's built who you are as a human being. So what do you find that's unique about this place? What is it that grabbed you?
Ooh. Well, what grabbed me about this area was the sports feel. So exactly what we have going on today of like when I drive out of here, I'm going to go through an Olympic town and then I'm going to see iron people training. And then I'm going to see fishermen on the river. And then I'm going to see just people out recreating and being in nature. So that's what pulled me here. And that's why I settled here. I was like, I want to be an athlete in the Adirondacks.
That's great. I actually say that a lot to people because they compare it to the Catskills a lot. And I always say, like, when it comes to a lot of mountain towns and mountain areas, you either get like artsy mountain town or sporty mountain town. And that's why I always compare the two. And I mean, this is obviously sporty mountain town.
It is.
And that's what I like about it too, that like you're never going to drive anywhere not seeing someone running or on a bike.
Exactly.
And it's very, very sporty. And that to me is also what I find separates the Adirondacks from many places.
Yes. And I think the Catskills are more artsy.
Oh, big time.
Yeah.
Big time.
And I love their feel.
You go to Woodstock, it's like, that's what that crowd is. And it's fine. That's just like, that's what their crowd is.
I love it.
All right. So in the last question, why do you go after these FKTs? In one quick sum up, what is it that draws you to go back time and time again, searching for them?
Honor your gifts you've been given. That is a big reason. And I'm not going to waste a day that I get on earth. I have 2 chronic diseases, asthma and ulcerative colitis. And I was a sick kid and I know what it's like to just be in bed and really sick or in the hospital and really sick. And I'm just not going to waste it while I have it. And I want to be doing FKTs in my 60s and 70s. And I just want to be a voice, and I want it to be a woman's voice. And that's why I do it. It's like, don't waste your gifts and don't ever overlook what those gifts might be doing for someone who's coming up behind you.
That's great. Don't waste your gifts, everyone. It's leave this episode with that, burning through your brain for the rest of the day. So where can people find you online?
So I pretty much just stick to Instagram, and I am Bethany.climbs.
All right, there it is. All right, so we're going to wrap this episode up right there. Bethany, thanks for coming in studio here at the 4646 podcast. This has been really fun. But check her out, Bethany Climbs on Instagram. Thanks to all of you for listening to another episode of the 46 of 46 podcast. If you like the show, please leave a rating and review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify or wherever you get it. Head over to 46of46.com. Check out what I have there. I have an ebook for sale if you're looking to climb the 46 high peaks. It's a great resource to start with. I offer guide services, both virtual and in person. Check it out, 46of46.com. Thanks for listening to this episode of the Summit Sessions right here on the 46 of 46 podcast. Remember to always leave no trace, do the rock walk, and if you carry it in, carry it out. See you on the trails, everybody.